Welcome to the Spark of Ages podcast, where we're going to talk to game changers of all kinds about their big world-shaping ideas and what sparked them. I'm your host, Rajiv Parikh, and I'm the CEO and founder of Position Squared, a digital marketing company based in Palo Alto. So yes, I'm a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, but I'm also a business news junkie and a history nerd. I'm fascinated by how big world-changing movements go from the spark of an idea to an innovation that reshapes our lives. In every episode, we're going to do a deep dive with our guest about what led them to their own eureka moments and how they're going about executing it, and perhaps most importantly, how do they get other people to believe in them so that their idea can also become a spark for the ages. This is the Spark of Ages podcast. Today, we are sitting here in Park City, Utah, where we are having our growth marketing conference. And this is our third year of doing this, where we have amazing industry leaders, investors, we have executives from folks who've started the companies, folks who are scaling companies in the go-to-market sense. And it's our third year. It's just incredible. One of the great gifts we have today is we have David Yakobovitch with us, and he is here to talk with us about some of his experiences and his in-depth knowledge. And his greatest strength is in the area of data and AI. And he's a practitioner, he's an educator, as well as an investor. So David, so glad to have you here with us.
Rajiv, thanks for having me.
You're a general partner at Data Power Ventures. It's an early stage VC fund for the data economy. You're also a venture partner advisor at Legendary Ventures. It's a VC fund focused on consumer retail technology startups. Firms like Lululemon, Pinterest, and Airbnb. That's not bad.
Very small companies.
So you're the host of an AI and responsible AI podcast called Humane.
That's right. Yeah, since 2018.
2018. So you're also a fellow podcaster. So you can rate me as to how I do after this.
10s across the board.
I'll take it. As long as I get a tip for my Uber driving, that's perfect. David, you're also an active keynote speaker, guest lecturer at universities, at Carnegie Mellon and Columbia University. You also started as the AI policy ambassador for Google's Global Affairs, where you were the AI principal advisor who stress tested Google's AI-first software and hardware products, and you supported partnerships for Google for startups in New York City with VC firms and accelerators. David, you have a fellowship from Columbia University in the area of AI, MS from the University of Illinois Springfield, and a BA from the University of Florida. You're a state boy, just like me.
Go Gators.
Awesome. I'm a New Hampshire boy. His extensive experience and expertise in data science, product management, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and entrepreneurship make him an absolutely ideal guest for the Spark of Ages. So David, welcome to the podcast.
Wow, so excited to be here, Rajiv.
So great to have you. So if you were to talk about the data and AI landscape, what are the key opportunities that you're seeing? Like you saw what's happening at some of the biggest companies, right? At Google, was it the Magnificent Seven? Maybe it's the Sexy Six now because they dropped Tesla from that. But you are looking at the landscape and technology, but you're also seeing the startup activity. So you pick three trends that you're seeing, or three notable things that you're seeing.
Yeah, so I think 2024 is definitely a breakout year for data and AI, but this started well back into the early 2010s. And as we know, 2017, the transformer came about, and the last 14, 15 months is when LLMs hit the market. So I think one of the big trends for 2024 is to seeing applied AI truly in practice. 2023, a lot of companies were experimenting with chatbots. They're trying to do standard summarization, categorization with analysis, but now it's going to be moving more towards that real time. We spoke about earlier that not only Google's doing, but a lot of other note-taking apps in real time, insights in real time, extracting value in real time. I think a lot of applications are going to move there. I think that's one area. Number two, I think there's going to be a lot of super niching down into verticals. So when startups are building products, you might not say, I'm going to build for finance, but I'm going to build specifically for financial control for regulators around, loan approvals in finance, right? If you drill down into multiple levels, that's a better way to build products for an industry that needs change and get those use cases right. Beyond that, I think the third area is, we used to say that every company was a technology company, and then every company became a software company in the last couple decades.
Software is going to eat the world.
Software is going to eat the world. Well, guess what? Now AI is eating the world. Every company is becoming an AI first or AI powered company. Yeah. So I believe in the next few years, every product's going to have some extension where, here, use this ChatGPT integration, or generate this image, or here's your legal briefing. Let's summarize the value. And so I think it's actually table stakes for companies these days to build in different AI first features, not for the sake of FOMO and keeping up with the Joneses, but to ensure that your product is giving the most value for your customers.
That's really amazing. So the three things that you talked about are real-time products, getting super niche with data, and then digging into AI and making that an essential part of what you do as a company.
That's right.
Is that fair to say? Awesome. So as part of that, you've looked at many layers of the stack. Do you want to describe some of them in layman's terms?
Yeah, so the AI industry is always evolving, but what we have today is very much called the modern data stack. And this modern data stack basically means layer one, there's some sort of infrastructure. So the infrastructure could be APIs, it could be databases, it could be where your data is stored, and then how it's accessed. Then often layer two, you'll have different software to manipulate the data. These could be tools like Airflow, ETLs, Kafka, Pipeline, or any of these companies to help massage, manipulate, transform your data. Then you go to layer three. Layer three is where you get these insights. So these could be the dashboards, the analytic tools, building out to get the value that we talked about in email or through chatbot to surface those real-time results. And then layer four is actually the application layer. So if you want to actually interact with it as a customer or enterprise, you're going to have applications on your phone that do on-device chip management, or let you interact back and forth like with a chatbot. So I think those are the four layers. I think most companies are kind of still between layer 1 and 3. Layer 4 is, of course, the hot, sexy AI that we're all moving towards. And I think we're going to see more of that this year as every enterprise company is saying, we want to be AI first. We want to have these applications. A few years ago, we didn't know how to because the databases weren't up to par, that nothing was real time, or the data was too expensive to manage. But now all those prices are going down, so companies are ready to go.
What's like is there like an order of magnitude price reduction?
So we're seeing the reduction in both price and then time for results. So things that used to take 5 seconds now could take 10 milliseconds. So we're seeing the speed order is 100x plus. Prices have generally come down 60 to 70% from a few years ago. So what used to maybe cost $100,000 to build a chatbot might cost $30,000 these days. Wow. So, it's still not cheap, right? This is software.
It's not 10x yet.
It's not 10x.
It's not 10%. It's not like the thing that really drove the internet or drove us into computing is how a mobile phone is now was a supercomputer, right? That is greater than what Apollo 11 used, right? So it's not that yet, but it's getting there.
Right. And there's some areas that are just as expensive. We have the GPUs from NVIDIA, like these H100s and A100s. You can't even get a hold of. They're national assets. You see companies like Mark at Meta saying, we're going to buy $10 billion of H100s so we could do our real-time inference.
So put in the big order so that you can get first in line.
Yeah. So, we're looking at a lot of chip companies that are trying to optimize, solve LLMs faster, compete with NVIDIA, right? There could totally be more players in the space.
That's amazing. So there's a lot of growth there. There's a lot of so there's a lot of investment going towards the infrastructure players. NVIDIA, it's the chip, right? So the chip layer is really high end. There's all the compute layers. And actually, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an executive at one of the larger companies, and they're talking about how they are signing multi-billion-dollar deals for the infrastructure. And the interesting part about it is that they're signing those deals even before the applications have been built. That many of the applications, especially the enterprise ones, are still proof of concepts. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, so we're seeing today a lot of these companies signing large LOIs. And I think it's
LOI is a letter of interest.
A letter of interest or letter of intent. So you see some companies saying, we want $1 billion of purchase orders. and they want to be first to it. First mover advantage can be everything. I mean, think back to OpenAI and ChatGPT, right? They were the first mover advantage. Here we are more than a year and a half since the launch of these modern LLMs, and they are the dominant player in the world. Right. So sometimes that first mover advantage can give the company the opportunity to win a large market share.
It's amazing, right? It's a whole field in itself, right? Because you could talk about, you can go back to Google and say they weren't the first search engine. I remember back at the time in my days at Alta Vista, we were the first search engine, and Google went and thumped everyone. They were like the 20th or the 30th. And in Facebook's realm, right, Friendster was way earlier, or MySpace was way earlier, and then better one came along. But first mover can be huge here because the advantages of Mindshare, right? And I think one of the things we could definitely talk about is how OpenAI grabbed everyone's Mindshare by being a consumer application that everybody can relate to. So they're getting more data to improve their engine.
It's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be all closed, right? We're seeing other players like Meta with Llama 2 and Llama 3 building an open source as well. So I think there's a lot of room for multiple players in the space. You even see out of Europe, like Mistral building your own small model. So you and I can go into our Windows or Linux computers and just run our own chatbot for free. So I think a lot of this technology, as we saw how databases got commoditized, over time, large language models will be commoditized, but it's going to be the unique data moats. It's going to be how you can perform analysis and applications. And people are always willing to pay for managed service products that package and make it easy to build your whole.
That's a huge area of interest, right? So there are companies that are getting billions of dollars in funding between OpenAI and Anthropic and our friends at Cohere. So there are folks who are getting billions of dollars funding. There's Llama, which is Facebook's open source version of what is an LLM, like large language model. And then there are models you can literally run on your laptop, Mistral, right? Maybe help us think about why you said you kind of hinted at it. I can run Mistral on my desktop because what would I try to do with it? As an entrepreneur or a buddy or a company, what would I do with that versus going to OpenAI and using their APIs, their tokens to build an app?
Yeah. So, when you look at these like ChatGPT 4 or 3.5 Turbo, these models are huge. They're like trillion plus parameters. If you or I were to download it, it would take all the storage in our computer. And if we try to run a command, it would just take an hour or two. We just don't have the compute and processing power, which is why we're, in that case, running on Azure's servers to get all the access to all these great chips to move really fast. Right. Now, the question is, like, where do we see the future of AI assistants moving? And I think there's going to be three approaches. Number one is, well, we're all going to have our own AI-powered assistant. These super-powered assistants mean we have to make it accessible for everyone. And a model like Mistral, it's so small. It's like less than 100 gigabytes, which is small in 2024.
Today it's small. Yeah. No big deal. Yeah. You get on my iPhone.
That's right.
Like 250 gigabytes.
Even some of them are 1 terabyte these days. Yeah. So you can download it and just simply classify articles based on that locally on your machine. So I think it's further increasing the accessibility for everyone so that every device will have AI-powered assistants, and they'll be able to use local GPU and local TPU or MPU or whatever kind of device we're working with. So I think in the short term, we're going to have these super-powered assistants as they commoditize. Right. Over time, that's going to move into hardware. We're going to be at a point in the next couple of years where whether I have a pin on my shoulder or a smart contact lens or the Apple Vision Pro, all these are having real-time AI. I think this is where we're moving into bionics that are augmenting the human condition. And so we're going to be moving more there. We might even have a space in a few years where I have different augments on my arms so that if I would do CrossFit, I could actually do heavier weight training and just put them on while I'm working.
So in that, I don't need access to the entire, I don't need access to thousands and thousands of processors for that. Whoever may build that bionic CrossFit trainer has optimized. They call it RAG, retrieval for augmented generation version of it that just has data about what they consider best practices, data about me, data about what other people have done, but they've condensed it to something that can be on a local device.
Yeah, there'll be sensors there that will see if some of my muscles are overstressing, and they'll help compensate. Yeah. So I think we're going to get to that place pretty soon. And then the long-term vision for these AI-powered assistants, of course, we see Tesla Humanoid and other companies out there exploring that space, right? We're going to be able to say, like, if you're the Amazon warehouse, you need to lift 50-pound boxes 300 times a day, or can we have a machine support us there and have these humanoids that work alongside us?
It could be humanoids, or it could be assistive of ours, right? Like some of those movies where you're wearing an exoskeleton and you're doing things, or you could have a robot potentially doing it.
Yeah, and to do that, we need a lot of chips produced. We need to reduce the cost of compute and get that real time. We can't depend on going to a cloud server and then you're like, oh, the machine got stuck waiting for the data. But we have a lot of new technology coming out. There's Li-Fi coming out. There's YR, which is going to replace Bluetooth in a few years. There's a lot of great new technology, but these take years and years to go from proof of concepts to fast enough for the industry adoption.
Interesting. So there's also underlying technology that's being improved. Bluetooth to YR would be something that's more about the interconnection between devices at short distance.
That's right.
That's different. That takes longer to deploy than something that you deploy in the cloud. So you talked about how you're not using search anymore and you're using multiple chat engines. So why would you 1 minute use ChatGPT to get information? Because it's like you were saying, some of them are connected to Bing or other real-time search engines. And then why would you use Perplexity? Why would you then switch to Cohere's version, or why would you switch amongst them?
Well, I think, being only a year and a half into the LLM craze, I think it's worth, as consumers, trying out the different products. They're all going to be different experiences. They're all trained in different data sets. So if you ask a specific question about, like, how do I play pickleball from scratch, and you ask that to OpenAI versus Cohere, you might get a different response based on the data.
Do you have an example of one where one was better than the other?
It varies wildly with not only every question that you ask, but the intent of your question. And so we're seeing actually the rise of a new career opportunity called prompt engineers.
Okay.
We're seeing people who are getting hired full-time for companies to literally figure out how to best write the prompts so that the LLM engine gives you the best result back.
Right.
And so that means when you're generating images, if you say, for example, I want to have a city of a hotel in Park City covered with snow and cows running throughout the field, well, that kind of image may generate a different result.
Where we are right now
versus
at the top of a stable in an office.
This is so true. But depending on the language that you use, because these large language models are based off languages and the English intent, it could be different for each model. So I think that's number one, a different reason to try out different ones. Number two, it's the speed of them. So if you're paying premium for one of these models, you might get faster results than others. I know OpenAI and Anthropic have these really long context windows.
Right.
So you're able to run chats for days and days. Yeah. You might not be able to do that with other models.
Right.
So what used to maybe take me 10 to 20 hours, I could do in 2 to 3 hours. Or instead, I could still do 10 to 20 hours, but do 200 hours of productivity. Right. So you could reduce the time it takes, or you can get that much more accomplished to accelerate your work.
I did an AI and marketing conference, not the one that you and I did, but we did one on privacy, security, and ethics. And I basically went into one of the engines and asked, what questions should I hear the people who are coming? What questions should I ask? What questions are they likely to answer? Give me tests that can help me overcome these issues. And then and I asked them a bunch of questions and I shared it with the people I was presenting with. And they're like, oh, this is great. So we saved hours of time and effort. We still got great answers from people, but we moved them along much faster.
Yeah, you could seed the questions, you could prompt the questions, and it doesn't mean the model is going to give you everything. And so that's my biggest caution to people is about responsible AI.
Yes.
Don't assume that the results the model tells me about these math functions is correct. use my brain, think about this, ask the question again a different way.
So you get the citation, you go check up on it, and make sure you're not getting a hallucination. You're not getting something that's potentially false. Is that the notion of responsible AI, or is there something more? Is it more about ethics and bias?
Responsible AI, there's a lot to unpack. One of them is around the hallucination, right? Ensure that you're giving fair responses to an audience member. Because look, when we're chatting here, you and I are going to research it. But like, is my mom going to honestly research it? She's going to take it as true face value.
Classical, right?
Yeah.
So as an investor, how do you think about it?
Yeah, well, I think what's exciting about what OpenAI did is they unlocked the kimono for AI.
Yeah.
It used to be this very hands-off topic.
It blew open our
What
imagination.
is it, right?
Yes.
Now hundreds of millions of users can use a text prompt editor and get real results. It's not like, yesterday's AI technology when we think of the Jetsons. So one, that accessibility creates the possibility for consumers to adopt the products. And that means more people are going to build in the ecosystem, and it becomes that virtuous cycle.
Right. So now you can, if you're a budding entrepreneur or even an executive or a developer at a company, you can now work off of the marketplace with OpenAI or some of the other players. Right, and build your own applications.
Yeah, and I think that's the moment that OpenAI is having this year. They're having their Apple App Store moment by launching earlier in the start of 2024 these GPT stores, right?
Do you have 2 or 3 favorite startups in that area?
Oh, one of my friends, Reuven Cohen, so he's actually, he calls himself an ethical prompt hacker. So he spends all his time building out different prompts, and he's built applications to like automate his calendar and like just look at all of his emails daily and triage which ones he should respond to. I tell a lot of people in my life today as an investor and product leader that I actually don't spend much time in search. I spend most of my time in chat interfaces.
What?
I'm spending my time between Perplexity, between Cohere, Anthropic, OpenAI, Llama, Mistral, Falcon. Like almost everything. I don't search.
David, with all the stuff that's going on with AI, there's a lot of legitimate fear about, especially since it's happening so quickly, there's a lot of legitimate fear about everyone losing their jobs. Like if I have AI as my co-pilot tutor, why do I need tutors? Maybe I don't need teachers. Maybe I don't need folks who can write code if it's writing code for me, if my prompts are just in basic English, or prompts are written for me. Or why do I need to get my PhD to do something if the system already is a PhD? Or even in a more straightforward sense, I'm looking at loan applications and I'm filing them away and the system's doing it all for me. So there's jobs at every level, and especially at the more educated levels that are now being affected. What's your thought on this? I mean, it's quick, it's jarring, it could be tremendously challenging, exciting for someone who loves technology. It could also be scary.
The fears are real. They're definitely real, Rajiv. And the example you shared about our like AI-powered tutor, after OpenAI launched ChatGPT, Chegg, a public company, spoke about its earnings. And 1 quarter later, they were down 98%. Everyone just completely abandoned their products. So you've seen real jobs being lost every day because of AI, because of these co-pilots being in the world. And the challenge is figuring out how does policy manage with private tech change. And there's always a gap. And today we're seeing the EU Commission launching AI policies. 2 of our portfolio companies, one of them Vera AI, that does responsible AI for startups. Liz O'Sullivan spoke to the Biden administration to actually propose stronger regulations and policy. Another one of our founders, Francesco Marchioni from Applied XL in New York, he spoke to Boris Johnson's administration in the UK also about why we need stricter policies and regulation. Early in 2024, I also spoke to the information about this with responsible AI innovation. I think we have to move forward faster in policy because it lags behind and jobs will be at risk.
So, but you can't regulate something that's happening in technology, right? I mean,
but you absolutely can. So in Europe, several countries have banned self-checkout lanes at grocery stores. Really? They're completely banned. They're forcing and allowing people to keep jobs for like a universal basic income.
So maybe provide a transition point to it?
It could be, and some of that transition is
reskilling.
It's
it's not like New Jersey with, they still forced to fill your gas, whereas everywhere else you just do it yourself.
Yeah, New Jersey, we're not going to pay for your taxes. Okay, fireworks go in the East Bay. Look how quickly that can change. But I think it's going to require a lot of reskilling, upskilling initiatives. Okay. This takes the government to come in. They're going to have to support what are the new jobs going to look like. And there are going to be new jobs. When we think about 10 years ago, what were the top jobs? Lawyer, doctor, maybe software engineer, a couple others. As of 2023, 2024, top 10 jobs: data scientist, software engineer, site reliability engineer, maybe prompt engineer, application developer, front end, back end. It's all software jobs.
So people have to be reskilled. And what governments can help and our community can help is by helping people reskill themselves.
Right. And we can't make it the onus of you and I to reskill. There has to be support from society on that. And new jobs will come about, but these are real fears and they do need to be validated. People who are shrugging it off, they're living on another planet. I mean, most recently, the World Economic Forum early on said 40% of jobs are at risk. And I think that could even be an understatement, right? It's just, what is the time frame for those job shifts and changes?
In my company, we're already seeing a 30-40% increase in productivity in using various AI tools for everything from developing videos, creative, writing code. The easy answer is just to let folks go. The better way to go is say, a lot of things, why don't we do a lot more? Or do things in more depth, or be more personalized about how we create these campaigns. Let's go hyper-personalization. You really need those folks to drive all these things.
Yeah, I think you could have more leaner teams now, but it doesn't mean you have to reduce your force. It means with your current teams, you can augment and do more and have more productivity per employee and generate more revenue. And so my aspiration is that companies would be forward-thinking rather than short mind-sighted on cutting the bottom line.
So now, over the last few years, you've been building and investing in data products for businesses. So when you were at Google, you were working on data products. Can you explain to the listener what that means?
Sure. So I think in the last 10 years, data products have evolved. Any software that we work with today has multiple surfaces. Those surfaces could be things like email, chatbots, or actual reports. And often that data is static. But what if that's real time? What if you're having pipelines where you're getting real analysis and insights for executives, for sales leaders, or for operations to make business decisions? So at Google, we call data products that whole culmination of data intelligence, sales intelligence across all those surfaces.
So what's an example of that? So you weren't in the Google, everybody knows Google for Google search, right? And it's historical, but it can also be pretty much real time, especially with Google News and tweets and that kind of thing. But this is something different.
Yeah. So one thing that's well known in the industry is that outside of IBM, Google is now the #1 company for the most amount of internal tools managed of any company. There's literally tens of thousands of tools that are all in-house built. If you think of tools that are external like Asana or like Monday.com, Google has a version of every single tool built and maintained. Part of that's the proprietary edge of ensuring that you're building something that's secure and transparent and keeps the data locked in one central place, but also it's that the customization for your customer needs. Specifically, a lot of the internal tools I worked on included CRMs, email integrations, live chatbots with sellers. Wow. So all these tools we're seeing in the industry today, we have our own versions of these in-house.
So an example of a situation where you need a real-time data product, if you're in sales or marketing, what would that be?
Yeah, so think about when you're bringing on a new customer to Google Ads. You start with some sort of acquisition channel, and to get them to onboarding and to start spending actively and building in the Google ecosystem, you have to make sure you don't churn that customer. And in the small, medium business area of Google Ads, we see millions and millions of new inbound every single year. So if you could have real-time insights for sellers who are basically account managers to understand when there's a greater propensity of a customer to convert, or they need more support, or they don't need that support, or they need an insight that will help you help your customers. And so today we have all these real-time dashboards that every single seller can view for all their accounts and extract insights from different sources and then either share them directly with the client or use them to better manage their productivity and their performance for attainment and measurement.
Right, so they literally could be on a call with someone that's advertising on the Google network, And as they're going about the discussion, if there's information that's coming up about a competitor or a potential better ad that they can run or a different technique they could use in managing your Google account, that's going to be in front of them.
You'll either have insights as a collection before all your new calls of all the old calls and summaries, but then real time you could also get those insights. And of course, we see a lot of platforms building those today. Google does most of that in-house.
Right, because is that part of the 20% of time that Google engineers have, or that's something that's part of their normal project?
Right. So it's incredible to think that even today, like almost you'd say 80% of people at Google are engineers, right? There is a lot of the business org of product managers, partnerships, dev support. But engineers are full-time focused on these internal tools.
Yeah.
So for example, these ones that I work on, we have thousands of engineers managing the entire Google Ads ecosystem, both in internal tools and then external facing like PMax and others that you and I would see.
PMax, right. Yes, yeah. Performance Max. Right, which is the one Google tool that they tell us will rule them all, that where it will, based on the goals that you give it, it'll automatically manage your ad spending across display, video, and search, right? So it's one of the things my folks like to play with. Note to everyone, it doesn't work in every situation, which is why you hire an agency. So you made a pivot in your life where you were working, a job in a company, right? This was when you were in education, and then you went and started a venture firm. You just woke up one day and said, "Hey, let's write checks as a venture firm."
I think it's always been...
There's always a transition point.
It's always been like a dream of me to like coach a lot of founders and support them. And at a couple of my previous startups, I was at Galvanize and Single Store. It was at Galvanize, it was already my fourth startup I was at. And I was like, I want to provide some more support. And that's where I started doing these direct checks, 10, 25K checks, just getting my feet wet.
Starting feet wet, playing in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I was an EIR.
Figuring out what kind of founders are really going to be good.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I was an entrepreneur in residence at Techstars in New York City. So I was seeing founders cutting checks into their portfolio. And then at one point I realized, well, hey, look, I come from an immigrant family. I'm first generation. I came from lower middle class, worked my way up. Like, I don't have an unlimited checkbook.
So you had empathy for them.
I had empathy for founders. And I said, well, how can I further support founders with bigger checks? And that led me becoming that new generation of syndicate leads, like we see with Alex Pattis and Morgan Schwank and others who are leaders in the space. I was following in the footsteps of them as giants. Of course, doing that now, fast forward many years, I'm probably known as one of the top 25 syndicate leads out there in the industry. When the pandemic happened and when the recession of the return from COVID, a lot of these leads left. But I'm this person who's very persistent and disciplined. I've stuck with it over the years.
Well, I think it's because you know the core of these things. You understand the power of the data. The data is the new oil. So it doesn't matter, right? You know that regardless of a recession, these things are going to be persistent.
That's right. And by doing that, I was able to upsize my checks from 10, 25K checks to 100 to $500,000 checks, right? And it's been amazing to support founders because often when you're pre-seed or seed, a VC firm doesn't want to cut a $2-3 million check. So having these party rounds, having these operator VCs, which is who I became, supports founders that they can build their early milestones and then get the VC funding.
At the time you're at Google, you're also at the same time you're a venture capital partner. Why did Google let you do that?
Yeah, so my story about getting involved in the VC ecosystem started well before Google. I spent over 10 years working for 5 different startups as a tech operator. 2 of these were like the Series A type, 2 were Series B and C, which got acquired, and 1 was late stage pre-IPO. Along that journey, I got this infectious bug that I wanted to support founders, to coach and advise them. And I started very early on, around 2018-19, writing my own direct checks. That grew into launching my own syndicate SPVs, launching my own emerging fund, which became a portfolio of 35 data, AI, deep tech startups between New York City, Silicon Valley, and Seattle. So when I joined Google, it was just an extension of myself. I'm someone who loves community first principles, supporting founders. And so outside my core work at Google, part of my 20% capacities, I was mentoring startups, going through Google for Startups for Accelerator, supporting the accelerators in New York City like Antler and Techstars and ERA. And for me, that gives me a lot of life and a lot of energy supporting startups. So of course, I couldn't give that up. And now I've moved even closer in that space.
I think that's amazing that you were able to continue along with that opportunity. It's because most of the time when you join a company like Google, they don't want you to do that. And that's amazing that they gave you room for it. So you may have a fund that's of a certain size. And let's say it's $10 or $20 million, which I'm not saying that's where you are, but you can extend that fund by doing what they call like these syndicated rounds, or they call it SPV, special purpose vehicle.
That's right.
Where using some software like AngelList, you can literally say, oh, do you want to write a $10,000 check or a $20,000 check to support this round? And so you're the lead, right? So David, your fund may be the lead, and then it's pulling in money from other folks, and they're creating this vehicle, this entity that then invests in that company, right? So the company doesn't have to worry about this random investor or that random investor, in their mind, random investor on their case. They get to talk to you, the expert, who's going to help them on business matters, but you magnified the money you've put in by many more times.
That's right. And it's when you build these SPVs, right, there's a variety of entities involved, right? It could be angels, high net worths, family offices, or institutions. Sometimes they don't want to let a founder know that they're investing, but they want to be part of that ecosystem. Other times, a lot of investors want to be passive. They don't want to go direct on the cap table because there's a lot of process to manage. And as a syndicate lead, in my early days, I'm acting as a fund manager. And of course, now I am a fund manager, but it was managing that process through and through for hundreds and hundreds of investors.
It's really helpful. I've done a bunch of these of like the venture firm, like I might be an investor in a seed stage fund, and then all of a sudden, one of the startups, they want to do a bigger round, they want to hold their place, what they call pro rata.
That's right.
So they're like, okay, you can jump in for some minimum amount, and I really like it, so I'm in, and I can play in it, and not have to deal with all the disclosure and being in meetings and being listed on the cap table, like you're saying. So I think it's a great way to magnify yourself.
Thank you.
But now you were doing a lot of this in New York, right? So, and maybe you could correct my thinking about New York. I love New York, but I grew up in New Hampshire, and the reason I went to Silicon Valley was because I saw such an open mindset, right? It may have come from the social tolerance that people had for each other, the openness that it had. I felt like in the East Coast a lot that the answer, every time I had an idea, the answer was no but. Here's 100 things wrong, whereas in Silicon Valley it was like, yes, and let's riff together. In the end, we may come to the same answer, but there was an openness to discussion. Have you found that things have changed?
New York's a very special place. And for those who don't know, a couple of years after college in 2014, I was at an inflection point. I was at this quarter life crisis, and I was deciding, I want to leave Florida. Do I want to go to San Francisco? Do I want to go to New York City? I actually spent almost 3 months living in San Francisco in 2014. I was like, I'm going to try this out. And I was hosteling it up and meeting people and going to the tech events. I was drinking the Kool-Aid, hacker houses.
Not just tech, but social life-wise. I mean, very open to everything that you want to do, right? I mean, it's just amazing people that are, it's a huge amount of tolerance.
Yeah, that's right.
And acceptance, I'd say.
And it was...
Not even tolerance, acceptance.
It is acceptance, right? And California is always known for being one of the most progressive states out there. And it was a great experience. But I think for me then, what was lacking is the focus was way too much over-indexing on tech. And I truly wanted to be in a city that I believe is the center of the universe, where you get a little bit of everything. You can work hard, play hard, and you get every industry. I think also I felt a little homesick for my family. My parents, before I was born, they moved to South Florida. But I have over 50 cousins in the Northeast between Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York.
That must be great.
And I wanted to get close and get to know my extended family, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles. So I think with those indications, I made the jump to New York, crashed on a friend's couch, right? Got my way started. Thinking back about New York's evolution over the years, I agree with you. Back in 2008, 2009, tech was not a thing in New York. I think it started to get evolved around 2010 to 2012, you had FFVC, Union Square Ventures, a lot of these firms that built the foundation of New York. Of course, we know as of 2022, almost a quarter of venture dollars in the United States goes to startups in the tri-states.
That's awesome.
Half is still Silicon Valley, and the other quarter is the rest of the country.
Like you, I'm a big fan of. It was like, oh, there's investment going in New York, and Austin, and Boston, all over the country, and I'm like, this is great. This is what we want. We want entrepreneurs everywhere building great companies. It's the right. You can't just say, well, one area is the center of the universe. As much as you want it to be, as much as you think you want it, it's actually better for the whole network that there's multiple.
Yeah, I think so from a tech perspective. And so we've seen that. And I think the other decision that broke me to go to New York versus SF, I'm a very proud advocate in the LGBTQ community.
Awesome.
And I was, trying to find my identity in San Francisco when I was there.
And there's too many advocates in San Francisco.
There's so many advocates. And I made friends and I met people. And as you said, it's a very open culture. But at that point in my life, I was like, I think New York would provide the support, the nurturing I needed.
It's also a very supportive place.
Right.
Yeah. Place, yeah.
And so that, of course, I found my tribe and tribes in New York over the years. And today I spend a lot of my focus as a community builder outside of tech also for the community. I put on events that are very much non-party focused, which are about like networking for people in finance and tech and bringing together the community, whether that means on the VC side with, folks like the Gangels team or working with Out in Tech where I mentor founders who, are coming from diverse backgrounds who maybe struggle to get the meetings with a VC and be like, oh yeah, you're an LGBTQ founder. I'll take that first meeting. No problem. Like, let me give you some feedback. Let me give you some support.
So they have a person that's been in their world that can put out their hand and help them up.
Yeah, I think it's super important to always have people who are advocates on your side. And so that's been a real pleasure. And now being 10 plus years in New York, I found my community, but I'm also a community leader much in the side of product, in the side of LGBTQ, in the side of just general community events, putting them on, and it's exciting to bring people together.
Let's have an amazing group of friends.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. As long as you start with fun first. It's not about like, are you building the next unicorn? We'll all get there. One of my biggest success stories in New York is backing an LGBTQ founder. Nice. I actually backed David Stein. He built Ash Wellness out of Cornell Tech and 500 startups. Started supporting before the pandemic. Now we support them every round through their seed extension. Now they're in Series A. Awesome. And they build these remote diagnostic testing kits where you and I could do our blood or urine testing at home and then send those results out and find out, hey, we're HIV negative and let me get my PrEP, or, I'm just someone who needs to get whatever of 150 plus biomarkers. So it's really great to support the community. That's awesome. And, I talk the talk and walk the walk.
You definitely do. I think Jim Cascade in one of our earlier podcasts, and we talked about how quickly that this has happened, right? So if you look at how long it took for TV to be adopted, or how long it would take to get 25% of Americans to use something like that, maybe 40 to 50 years, right? Electricity was like 60, 70 years. Your mobile phone would be 7 or 8 years, right? This is less like a year or two. And it's because the cloud is already there. The devices are already there. It was really quick to deploy. So there's push and pull, right? There's some things that you can deploy in the cloud that you can get super fast. There's some things that need every device to have it. It has to be part of the infrastructure so they move slow. These are tools that make you feel like they're God, right? It's it's coming down from the heavens because it sounds so intelligent.
Yeah, and the other day I was chatting with my parents, and they were scrolling through their Facebook feed, and they said, "Oh, isn't this true? Didn't you do this?" And I said, "No, actually, this post and that post had nothing to do with each other, but Meta surfaced it for you." And so it's incredible the gap in tech enablement we're having between generations today. And we need to provide more support for silver tech, which is our aging population. And I think a lot of companies are not being responsible enough to support. They're thinking of the zillennial and the millennial and us, Gen Y. But we need to provide better safety mechanisms so that wrong actions are not occurring. So one, it's about that fairness. I think beyond that also, is about bias, right? So if my mom does a search versus a woman in Iran does a search, right? Are they going to get results that are personalized and are safe for them? Or are they going to get data that could be completely wrong and could actually be offensive? And that's why when we think about the political election that's coming up in 24, just earlier in the year, Sam and the OpenAI team specifically said, we are banning all political questions. Any questions you ask this year, OpenAI will say, I cannot answer. For any local elections, state elections, federal elections, they do not want to be involved in misinformation and disinformation campaigns. These models today for generating images have gotten so good. If you and I wanted to use Midjourney, we could literally generate an image of Obama and Trump shaking hands in 10 seconds.
High-fiving each other.
Doing all kinds of making it look like it's real. But you're like, wow, did they sign an agreement? Yes. No, they never did that. That's fake news.
Yeah, we can do a lot of things. And that is one of the biggest concerns about this election and any election going forward. Let's go to something more back in your daily life, which is now you're back at Data Power Ventures. It's a early to mid-stage, early to Series A fund, right? Like $100-200 million. Is that the fund? And it's, I'm sure you're managing hundreds of millions. The fund itself is over multiple funds, is managing quite a bit. What's your go-to-market for a fund like this? Because we're sitting from where I am in Silicon Valley. There's lots and lots of great funds. How do you differentiate?
Yeah, so Data Power Ventures specifically is focused on that data first principles. Right. We actually launched back in 2020 something called the Data Rider or Data Pledge, similar to when Act One Ventures launched the Diversity Rider. And this is telling all of our companies that if we invest in you, we promise to be good fiduciary of data access. And we require you as founders to do that as well. Similar to some other great programs, we have experts in residence all across different CXO stacks and levels. So founders that we're investing and backing as pre-seed or seed can get that support before they become scale up to Series A. So really that sweet spot's coming in very early, offering that technical support, offering that product marketing support, because often these founders, they're brilliant. They could build anything in technology, could build the next Mistral AI, but if you don't know go-to-market, if you don't know how to build the business model innovation, it's just a pipe dream. It's
I think one of the greatest things, right, beyond, a lot of times people in their mind just think it's a check. And it's not just a check, right? It's people who are going to help you make a difference. So your strength is that you focus on data, you help them with all the other things. They may be great technologists, they may have great ideas. You're guiding them on how do I take that product, how do I get it to market, how do I do my product market fit, maybe eventually go in and talk about their go-to-market fit. Like you're helping them, you're going with them in depth.
Yeah, because when you think about companies that are in this classic pre-seed and seed stage, pre-seed companies don't often even have a product yet. And seed, they have a product, but maybe it's 100,000 revenue, maybe $1 million revenue. They have not hit product market fit. So they really need a lot of support. These teams are often still 4 to 10 people. And the best support is outsiders, right? Outsiders who don't have necessarily a strong opinion about your product and can tell you, well, this is what I'm seeing in the industry. And have you thought about it with this other approach?
Right. Right. So it's really helpful to have that community with you and your team brings that to them. So let's talk about what drives you, why you got into this field. Was there just a youthful thing that sparked you about technology? Was there something you did when you were younger?
So for me, I'd say back in middle school, I did math competitions.
Just for fun.
Just for fun. How fast could I solve math by hand, or could I use the TI-84 calculator to do some statistics?
Oh, that's the super high-tech calculator.
We love those, right?
It was. I mean, those were amazing calculators back then.
And that led me to state and national competitions and ARML and all these top math competitions that now these days, our LLMs can do all this for us. So it's just earlier in 2024, there was a research report that the Math Olympiad was solved by some LLM. So, students like myself and others who would dedicate years and years to learn the most advanced proof concepts. Now it's all
Should you still learn that?
You should still learn it, I think. But I think education is going to shift. It's no longer going to be this space where you and I manually learn something at a slow level. We're going to move to a level of education where educators can tailor education for each student. So perhaps you have students with learning disabilities who can learn a little bit slower in the class, get support with large language models and other tools to help get them up to speed.
But do you feel like there's a concern, like if you don't actually walk through how some of these things are, how your multiplication tables and getting into algebra and learning about derivatives and trigonometry, if you don't go into that depth, it may be hard for you to understand some of the concepts of variables being a substitute for a hard answer, right?
I think you can still do all of it. It's just going to look different. Today, we're going to be solving math on our iPads, and we're going to have an AI assistant that verifies if you did it right or wrong, or provide a different solution and give you that feedback that the teacher or TA would provide much quicker. So you'll have the middle of the pack, like most people who learn and only want to get to a certain level. But then the people who want to go for PhDs, they can accelerate through the classroom and not be held back because they're like, I'm super fascinated in math. So let me
They can catch up faster and they can get teachers help.
I want to do 12th grade calculus in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Sure, you could do it now.
Why not? That was the original promise of Khan Academy, right?
Yeah.
To accelerate you through that. When you were doing these math competitions in middle school, what's the journey look like from that? Like, sounds like you have a nice supportive family. Was there a person in your life that said, I want to be like that person. I want to, that person, like, this is a way that I get into this technology in Florida, right? So what took you there? Was there a professor, parent, mentor, what inspired you?
Yeah, so growing up, actually, my dad, we're an immigrant family, and he was very much into electronic and circuits. And when he moved over from Israel to New Jersey, he started doing like TV repair, VCR repair back in the 70s. And when he made his way down to Florida, he launched his own shops. At one point, had multiple locations, dozens of engineers fixing all kind of products. This is the analog days, of course.
Right.
And for me in elementary, middle school, and high school, I would go to my dad's shop and I would literally take apart circuit boards and remove capacitors and fix tubes for TVs and VCRs and audio kits. And this is how I got very hands-on into the precursor to robotics. Really, my dad inspired me so much about this. I'd look at schematics.
So you were already comfortable back then. Your father was doing it. You go to the shop. You weren't like the one that in some random house taking apart the TV and pissing off your parents. You were actually with a parent that was like, oh no, come take this apart with me.
Yeah, my dad would say, hey, like, I'm obviously fixing these ones to put, bread and butter on the table. But this one, it's okay if we don't fix it for a few weeks. But if you do this, David, and then you fix it, I'll also give you $10 or $20 if you fix it.
Father, son, playing with these toys and getting paid for it.
And getting paid for it. What better in middle school incentivizing you?
That's amazing. I love this. And then later on, as you went through, you also, you were first in education, right? And then you went into investment. So how'd you make that move?
Yeah, so
what sparked you for that move?
So doing all this math in middle school and high school, it led me in college. Actually, I originally went for math and physics. That's why I was going to college.
Right. You did what you were good at.
I did what I was good at, but I quickly said, do I want to do theory or applied? And that's what led me into information systems, statistics, data analysis. And in college, I caught the bug for startups. That's when Startup Weekend became a thing. And so I went to every hackathon I could go. And very quickly, I realized, I think I'm kind of good at these hackathons. And I would, win awards for, best spoken or best product, working with big teams at the university. I enjoyed it. I was even at cryptography competitions. So
the competition was not just you building something, but then you had to explain it. So that's why you got good at actually explaining it to folks.
That's right. I think that was the precursor to education and doing a lot of this tech enablement. And post-college, then I started doing these jobs, both at large companies and then startups. And the common thread is I was always the tech enablement guy. I'd work with the data science teams, the software engineers, the sales teams, and help them learn SQL, help them learn Python, help them learn Excel. Naturally, I became decent at it, and then went to two of the large boot camps in the space, General Assembly, which got bought by Adecco.
That's right.
And galvanized by Stride. And so I was running these enterprise teams for them, these motions with large hedge funds, quant shops, telcos, teaching non-technical people how to prompt, but to prompt with SQL or to prompt with Python. Of course, now we're in the days of prompting with large language models.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how I got through college was teaching my roommates how to do the electrical engineering work. So just because I was doing it, I got much better at it. And of course, I did pretty well. I got to be. It helped me do better on tests and probably kept me away from a lot of trouble. So, especially since I was a frat guy. So now you're talking about LLMs, you're talking about data, you're talking about technology. Is there something either from before or after that we normally wouldn't know about you that's like a favorite invention or technology?
Okay, so I think everyone is both founders.
So we know you're like LLMs, so we already get to LLM.
Yeah, so I think as founders, operators, and investors, we all have what's called an anti-portfolio.
Yes. That
startup you wish you got hired for, the one you wish you launched, or the one you wish you funded. And probably it was around 2012, 2013, I, in my hackathon phase, went to Miami and formed a team with some incredible engineers. And we built this product called Gorilla Cab. This is just when Zimride was launching. We basically built Lyft in over a weekend hackathon. And we had a moment there. We won first place for this AT&T hackathon. We said, should we launch this as a startup? Uber didn't even exist. Lyft didn't even really exist. And we're like, we think we could do it, but the team really didn't come together. Of course, that was a missed opportunity. Lyft and Uber became multi-billion-dollar startups.
So you were already in this multi-sided network.
I've always been in a startup. One of our hackathons was creating earbuds that you could press, pause, and play and change songs. This was years before the Apple AirPod Pro came out. So we've always been really early. I've always been this bleeding adopter in technology.
Yeah.
Both the hardware side and the software.
And then over time, if you invest in it, pick at the right moment, you can actually get it somewhere. So is there like a personal moonshot that you'd have?
Personal moonshot. I think the biggest moonshot I have is investing in 1,000 data first principal companies. I truly think we're at the beginning stages of unlocking the world with data. If we think in the next 30 years, as we get to 2050 plus, there's going to be millions of satellites in space. We're going to be having stations on the moon. We're going to be having this YR and Li-Fi and all these data sensors moving everywhere. We're going to probably have dozens of these devices we each own with our endpoints. There's going to be thousands of startups that need to build the infrastructure and build the tooling around that. And I want to support founders who are very ambitious about building quick products, constantly pivoting, understanding the market, and truly building for the next data economy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So your life and your moonshot and it all comes together really nicely.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed looking back, right, on like my early days of math into education, into building products, and now investing. And I'm excited at the crossroads I'm at. You know, a lot of my experience has been as a early stage investor, right? These pre-seed seed data AI companies. But now spending my time between Data Power and Legendary Ventures, Legendary has its own early stage practice and its growth practice.
And are you teaching them are you teaching these founders about building culture too?
I think culture is essential. So having backed so many founders, I've seen it all in my short existence.
And working in bigger companies.
Yeah, I've seen
educating folks.
Founders break up, turnarounds, dissolutions. These things are normal, and you need to have VCs who are there to support you through both the good times and the challenging times.
That's awesome. So now, say you're in a parallel universe, right, and you weren't so into math and science and data. What would you be doing?
Gosh, well, I do love community. In New York, I do put on events for VCs and founders. And also just, it's so important to me because I think grassroots is how you do everything in life. You have to start with your customer. You have to listen to them. And so for me, when I've done anything in community, I always ask people, what's your feedback? What do you want to see? And that's how I build it. Because honestly, my biggest life motto is don't hold strong opinions about loosely held ideas. My opinion does not matter about almost anything in life. So I'm really trying to get that feedback, get all these data signals from the community. But if I could do it over again, I truly wish I would have gone all in on robotics and hardware and building software there. I love it today. I still, dabble in code and things when I can, but there's only so much time and it's always trade-offs in prioritizing what I build. So that's, I would say, if I could do it again, I would love to build the next SpaceX or build the next, humanoid robot.
Well, you'd certainly understand the underlying technology for it. Really know how to take it up from first principles onwards. So that's an awesome sense that I get from chatting with you, that you have that ability. you're at this conference and you, like you talked about, we're meeting with entrepreneurs, technology executives. You've met with folks who are board members of public companies or executives of public companies. Any thoughts about that kind of community that you've been involved with over the last day?
Wow. Well, first, the caliber of talent is incredible. I was telling close friends before coming to the conference, I said, why me? Like, it's just an incredible group and selection of people. So first, like, honored to be part of such a great group. Also, everyone is just so open with their ideas, hungry to learn new things, hungry to share best practices in the industry. And I think that's what community is about. When you're masterminding, when you're bringing everyone together, it's collaborating. And who knows what's going to come out of this week, right? Maybe new startups, new ventures, new collaborations. For me, that's fun. I tell everyone, let's make sure we have fun. Let's build community, get to know each other personally on relationships first. And then I'm sure we'll do some business things over time as well.
I really hope that happens. That's my intent on it. Just like you, that one of the things I love about you is you have this real deep affection for people who create community and who build each other up and drive success. And so that's the thing I care about the most is if we'll all make money. Money's out there for people to make, but it's really about the connections you have with amazing people. So I'm so glad that you're here with us to do this and glad that we can also take the time and do this podcast. So thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thanks for having me.